Robert barely slept that night. By 5 in the morning, he gave up trying and went downstairs to the restaurant. Tom was already there, dressed in his work clothes but clearly not planning to leave yet. Couldn't sleep either? Robert asked. Are you kidding? Tom said. This is the biggest day of your life. I called in sick to work. I'm not missing this. Robert felt a surge of gratitude. A week ago, they'd been strangers. Now Tom felt like family. You didn't have to do that. You need that job. They'll understand, Tom said firmly. Or they won't, and I'll find another job. But right now, you need someone in your corner, so I'm staying. At 7:30, Mrs. Patterson arrived in a taxi, carrying a briefcase that looked almost as old as she was. With her was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a rumpled suit. This is Daniel Foster, she introduced him. He's the lawyer I mentioned. He's looked over all the documents and thinks we have a strong case. Daniel shook Robert's hand. Your father was a pillar of this community, he said. I'm honored to help protect his legacy. By 8 o'clock, 7 members of the community cooperative had gathered at the restaurant. George, Rita, and 5 others, all of them ready to fight for Chen's Kitchen. They spent 30 minutes reviewing their strategy, going over numbers, preparing arguments. At 9 o'clock sharp, they walked into the bank together. The bank president, a neat man in his 50s named Richard Morrison, met them in a conference room. He had the bank's representative with him, the same young man who'd done the walkthrough yesterday. Both looked confused to see such a large group. Mrs. Patterson, Morrison said, standing to greet her. Your call yesterday was quite intriguing, though I'll admit, I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish. The foreclosure is already finalized. Nothing's finalized until the keys change hands, Mrs. Patterson said sweetly, and we have a proposal we think you'll want to hear. For the next hour, they made their case. Daniel presented the legal framework for a community cooperative. George showed financial projections. Rita talked about the restaurant's history and its importance to the neighborhood. Other members shared stories about how the restaurant had helped them or their families over the years. Robert watched Morrison's face throughout, trying to read his reaction. The bank president listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. But his expression remained neutral. Then Mrs. Patterson spoke. She was the last one, and she'd insisted on going last for a reason. Mr. Morrison, she said, I know this is unusual. Banks don't typically like dealing with community cooperatives. You prefer clean, simple transactions. One buyer, one seller, paperwork signed, done. But I want you to consider something. She pulled out Robert's father's journals and placed them on the table. These are the journals of the man who built Chen's Kitchen. For 30 years, he documented every struggle, every triumph, every person he helped. This restaurant nearly failed twice. Both times, the community saved it. Not because it was a good investment, but because it mattered to us. She opened one of the journals to a marked page. This entry is from 2008. The recession had hit and the restaurant was drowning in debt. But the community organized a fundraiser. Do you know who donated the most money, Mr. Morrison? The bank president shook his head. Your predecessor at this bank, James Whitfield. He gave $5,000. And he convinced the bank to restructure the restaurant's loan at a lower interest rate. He did that because he believed some things are more important than money. He believed that places like Chen's Kitchen make communities stronger. Morrison looked uncomfortable. That's a touching story, but I have responsibilities to the bank's shareholders. I can't make decisions based on sentiment. I'm not asking you to, Mrs. Patterson said. I'm asking you to make a decision based on good business sense. We're offering you $80,000 as a down payment. We're proposing a 15-year payment plan with reasonable interest. You'll make more money from us than you will from selling to a developer who'll tear this place down and sit on the property for years waiting for the market to improve. Daniel jumped in. I've run the numbers. The developer who's expressed interest is offering $75,000 for a quick sale. You'll get $80,000 from us immediately, plus 15 years of interest payments. It's actually better for the bank. Morrison looked at the papers Daniel had prepared. Robert could see him doing the math in his head. And what guarantee do I have that this cooperative won't fail in 6 months? Morrison asked. You don't, Mrs. Patterson admitted. But you didn't have a guarantee when you loaned money to the restaurant 30 years ago either. Sometimes you have to take a chance on people. Your predecessor understood that. There was a long silence. Morrison looked at the journals, at the community members sitting around the table, at Robert's nervous face. Finally, he sighed. I need to discuss this with our board, he said, but I'll recommend that we accept your proposal. The terms will need to be strict. One missed payment and the bank takes over immediately. No second chances. We understand, Robert said, speaking for the first time since they'd started. And thank you. You won't regret this. Morrison gave him a long look. I hope not. But I'll be honest with you, young man. The real reason I'm considering this has nothing to do with the money. It's because of what Mrs. Patterson said about my predecessor. Jim Whitfield was my mentor. He taught me that banking is about more than numbers. It's about building communities. He'd want me to do this. As they filed out of the bank, Robert felt like he was walking on air. It wasn't final yet, but Morrison had basically said yes. The restaurant might actually survive. Outside on the sidewalk, the community members erupted in celebration. Mrs. Patterson hugged Robert tightly. Despite being a foot shorter than him, "Your parents would be so proud," she whispered. Tom clapped him on the back. "You did it, man. You actually did it." But Robert shook his head. "I didn't do anything. You all did this. The community did this." "That's exactly right," Mrs. Patterson said. "And that's the lesson you needed to learn. None of us succeed alone. We all need help sometimes, and we all have something to offer. Your parents understood that. Now you do too." The bank board approved the proposal 3 days later. Robert signed so many papers his hand cramped. The community cooperative officially became the owners of Chen's Kitchen, with Robert as the managing partner. His salary would be modest, barely enough to live on at first, but he'd have a place to live in the apartment upstairs, and he'd be doing work that mattered. The reopening took 3 months to plan. The community members pitched in to help renovate. Tom, with his construction skills, became invaluable. He fixed the decades-old wiring, repaired the floors, updated the kitchen equipment. George handled the finances. Rita organized volunteers. Daniel dealt with permits and licenses. Robert hired a small staff. First was Tom, as the official maintenance manager and assistant cook. Then he hired a young woman named Jennifer, who'd been laid off from her waitressing job and was struggling to pay her bills. Then an older gentleman named Frank, who was trying to get back into the workforce after a heart attack, had forced him into early retirement. He also created something new, a community table program. Anyone who was hungry could come in and get a free meal, no questions asked. To pay for it, they set up a board where paying customers could purchase meals in advance for others. Robert called it the Pay It Forward board. Mrs. Patterson suggested one more addition, a homework corner for kids, staffed by volunteer tutors from the community. Lily was the first student, but soon other children joined her. Parents working evening shifts could drop their kids off knowing they'd be fed, safe, and helped with their schoolwork. On reopening day, the line stretched around the block. News coverage of the community saving the restaurant had drawn attention. Local TV stations came to film. Newspaper reporters interviewed Mrs. Patterson, who told them about the restaurant's history of helping people. But Robert's favorite moment came when a homeless man approached the door hesitantly, looking at all the well-dressed people in line. Robert saw him and immediately walked over. "Come on in," Robert said, guiding him past the line. "Community table is right over here." "What would you like to eat?" The man's eyes filled with tears. "Really? I can just eat?" "That's why we're here," Robert said simply. Throughout the day, Robert moved through the crowded restaurant in a daze. The tables were full. The kitchen was loud with orders. His mother, who'd been brought from her care facility for the day, sat in the place of honor, beaming with pride. Tom worked alongside him in the kitchen, somehow keeping up with the orders despite having only learned to cook a few months ago. Lily helped clear tables, taking her job very seriously. As the dinner rush started to wind down, Mrs. Patterson tapped her glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, "to Chen's Kitchen, which has been feeding this community for 30 years, to Robert's parents, who taught us that kindness matters more than profit, to Robert himself, who carried on their legacy even when it seemed impossible, and to all of you for proving that when we work together we can accomplish anything." "Hear, hear," everyone shouted. Robert felt Tom's hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Tom asked quietly. "Yeah," Robert said, wiping his eyes. "I'm just thinking about how different things were 3 months ago. I was broke, alone, convinced I'd failed at everything. Then you and Lily knocked on that door and everything changed." "We changed each other," Tom said. "You gave us a home when we had none. But more than that, you gave me a purpose again. You showed me that past mistakes don't define us, that we can always start over. Lily ran up to them, her eyes bright with excitement. Robert, there's a family at the community table. The mom says they just lost their apartment. Can I help serve them? Robert looked at Tom, who nodded with pride. Go ahead, sweetheart. Show them we care. As Lily rushed off to help, Robert watched her interact with the struggling family. The mother looked exhausted and defeated, just like Tom had looked that first night. But as Lily brought them food and chatted cheerfully, the woman's face began to soften. The children started to smile. The father's shoulders relaxed slightly. It was happening already. The cycle of kindness his parents had started was continuing, multiplying, spreading to new people. Lily, who'd been homeless herself just months ago, was now helping others. Tom, who'd needed help, was now stable enough to offer it. And Robert, who'd been drowning in failure and debt, was now running a restaurant that prioritized people over profit. Later that night, after the last customer had left and the staff had cleaned up, Robert sat alone in the quiet restaurant. He pulled out his father's journal and read one of the last entries. Sometimes I worry about what will happen to this place when I'm gone. Will Robert understand what we tried to build here? It's not about the food, though the food matters. It's not about the money, though we need money to survive. It's about creating a space where everyone is valued, where everyone belongs. It's about remembering that we're all connected, that helping others ultimately helps ourselves. I hope he learns this lesson, even if it takes him a while. Robert closed the journal and smiled through his tears. I learned it, Dad, he whispered to the empty room. It took losing everything, but I finally learned it. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife Linda. Saw the news coverage. I'm proud of you. Sophie wants to come visit next month. Would that be okay? Robert's heart swelled. He hadn't seen his daughter in 6 months. Yes, he typed back. I'd love that. I have so much to tell her. Another text came in, this one from Tom. Lily and I are upstairs. Wanted to say thank you again. Not just for the apartment or the job. For believing in us. For showing us that good people still exist. You've changed our lives. Robert set down his phone and looked around the restaurant. 3 months ago, this place had represented failure to him. His inability to live up to his parents' legacy. His mistakes and bad decisions. The end of everything he'd worked for. Now it represented possibility. Second chances, community, the power of people helping people. It represented his father's words coming true. Kindness multiplies. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, who'd saved the restaurant twice, 30 years apart. About Tom, who'd gone from homeless to employed and stable. About Lily, already learning to help others despite being just a child. About all the next morning arrived too quickly. Robert had barely slept, his mind spinning with everything he'd read in his father's journals. Now, sitting at one of the tables with cold coffee in front of him, he watched the clock tick toward 9 o'clock. That's when the bank representative was supposed to arrive for the final walkthrough. Tom had already left for work, but not before apologizing for the 100th time. I wish I could stay and help you, he'd said. I feel like I'm abandoning you. You're not abandoning anyone, Robert had told him firmly. You need that job. Besides, this is just paperwork. Nothing to help with. Now alone in the quiet restaurant, Robert wasn't so sure. This wasn't just paperwork. This was the end of everything his parents had built. Tomorrow he'd hand over the keys and Chen's kitchen would be gone forever. Some developer would probably tear it down and put up condos or a chain store. All those memories, all that history would disappear. At 8:45, there was a knock at the door. Robert looked up, confused. The bank rep wasn't supposed to be here for another 15 minutes. Through the glass, he saw an elderly woman standing outside, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. She looked to be in her 90s, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind thick glasses. Robert opened the door. I'm sorry, we're closed. I know you're closed, dear, the woman interrupted gently. I'm not here to eat. I heard the restaurant was being sold and I wanted to come say goodbye before it was too late. I'm Helen Patterson. Robert's breath caught. Mrs. Patterson, the woman from his father's journal, the one who'd loaned them money when they were about to fail. He'd assumed she was long dead. Mrs. Patterson, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Please come in. I'm Robert. This was my parents' restaurant. Oh, I know who you are, she said, making her way carefully to a chair. I watched you grow up in this place. Used to see you doing your homework right at that table over there." She pointed with her cane to the corner table where Lily had been sitting just yesterday. Robert helped her get settled, then went to make her tea. It was an automatic response, something his mother had taught him. When someone visits, you offer them tea. It didn't matter that he was about to lose everything. Mrs. Patterson was a guest, and guests got tea. When he brought the cup to her, she smiled. "Your mother always made the best tea. Used to get it from a special shop in Chinatown." "Is this the same?" "It is," Robert said. "Last box we have." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment while Mrs. Patterson sipped her tea. She looked around the empty restaurant with sad eyes, taking in all the missing pictures on the walls, the stacked boxes, the signs of a place being dismantled. "It's hard to believe it's really ending," she said finally. "This place has been here my whole adult life. Longer, really." "You were one of my parents' first customers," Robert said. "I found my father's journals yesterday. I read about how you helped them when they were about to lose everything." Mrs. Patterson waved a hand dismissively. "That was nothing. The least I could do after everything they did for me." "It wasn't nothing," Robert said firmly. "They would have lost this place if not for you." She looked at him with those sharp eyes. "And what about you, dear? How are you holding up?" Robert hadn't expected the question, and it hit him harder than it should have. Something about this kind old woman asking genuinely about his well-being made all his carefully constructed walls crumble. "I'm okay," he said, but his voice cracked on the words. "Or I will be. I feel like I failed them. My parents built something special here, and I couldn't keep it going." "Oh, Robert," Mrs. Patterson said, shaking her head. "You didn't fail anyone. Life is hard, and sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. That doesn't mean we failed. But they trusted me with their legacy." "Their legacy isn't this building," she interrupted. "Their legacy is kindness. It's caring for people. It's creating community. And from what I hear, you've been carrying on that legacy just fine." Robert looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Patterson smiled mysteriously. "Small communities talk, dear. People notice things. I heard about the homeless man and his daughter you've been helping. Letting them stay upstairs, making sure they're fed, watching the little girl while her father works." Robert felt his face flush. "How did you know about that?" "I have a neighbor who walks by here every morning. She saw the lights on upstairs and got curious. Asked around. Word gets around quickly when someone does something good." Mrs. Patterson reached across the table and patted his hand. "That's your parents' legacy, Robert. Not the building or the business. It's people helping people, and you're living that every day." Before Robert could respond, there was another knock at the door. He looked up to see the bank representative, a young man in a crisp suit carrying a briefcase. "Right on time." "I have to take care of this," Robert said apologetically to Mrs. Patterson. "I'll wait," she said calmly, "if you don't mind." The meeting with the bank rep was quick and painful. Forms to sign, inventory to verify, keys to hand over tomorrow at noon. The young man was polite but businesslike. This was just another foreclosure to him, another file to close. He didn't see the decades of memories, the love that had been poured into this place. After he left, Robert sat back down with Mrs. Patterson, feeling exhausted and empty. "That's that then," he said. "Tomorrow at noon it's officially over." Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, staring into her now empty teacup. Then she looked up at him with a determined expression he hadn't seen before. "Robert, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. If you could keep this restaurant, would you?" "Would you want to?" Robert thought about it. A week ago, his answer would have been yes without hesitation. But now, after reading his father's journals after the past week with Tom and Lily, he wasn't sure anymore. "I don't know," he admitted. "A week ago, I would have said yes because I thought I owed it to my parents. But now I realize the restaurant was never really about the building or the business. It was about something bigger. But that something bigger needs a place to happen," Mrs. Patterson said. "Your father's journals were right. This restaurant was special because it was a place where everyone was welcome, where people took care of each other. The world needs more places like that, Robert, and from what I can see, you understand that better than most." "Understanding it doesn't change the fact that I'm broke and the bank owns the building," Robert said, more bitterly than he intended. Mrs. Patterson pulled out her phone, which looked comically large in her tiny, wrinkled hands. "May I make a few phone calls?" Sure, but I don't see how. Just trust me, dear. For the next 30 minutes, Mrs. Patterson made call after call. Robert tried not to eavesdrop, but it was impossible in the quiet restaurant. She was calling people from the community, telling them about the restaurant closing, about Robert helping Tom and Lily. Each call ended the same way. Can you come to Chen's kitchen? Today, as soon as possible. Yes, it's important. By noon, people started arriving. First came an older gentleman named George, who'd been a regular customer for 20 years. Then a middle-aged woman named Rita, who Robert vaguely remembered from his childhood. Then more people, a steady stream of them, until 15 people crowded into the restaurant. Robert stood there in shock, not understanding what was happening. Mrs. Patterson tapped her cane on the floor to get everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone her age. I've gathered you here because we have a problem, and I think we can solve it together. This restaurant is being foreclosed on tomorrow. Robert Chen has worked hard to keep it going, but the debt was too much. There were murmurs of sympathy from the crowd. Robert wanted to disappear through the floor. But here's what you might not know, Mrs. Patterson continued. Robert has been carrying on his parents' tradition of helping people. Right now, he's providing shelter and food for a homeless father and daughter. He's doing this while losing everything himself. That's the kind of person he is. That's the legacy his parents left. A woman in the crowd spoke up. I remember his parents. They fed my family for free for months when my husband lost his job. We would have gone hungry without them. Me too, said another voice. They gave my son a job when he got out of rehab and nobody else would hire him. He's 5 years sober now, running his own business. More stories poured out. Robert stood there overwhelmed as person after person shared how his parents had helped them or someone they loved. Free meals, jobs, advice, small loans that were never repaid, a warm place on cold nights. His parents had touched so many lives and he'd never fully realized it. Your parents made this place special, Mrs. Patterson said, turning to Robert. And from what I can see, you want to continue that. Am I right? Robert thought about Tom working hard at his construction job, trying to rebuild his life. He thought about Lily doing her homework at the tables, finally having a safe place to be. He thought about his father's journal entry about feeding souls. Yes, he said quietly. I do. Then let's save it, Mrs. Patterson said simply. Not for Robert's sake. Not even for the memory of his parents. Let's save it because the community needs places like this. We need places where people care more about each other than about profit. George, the older gentleman, cleared his throat. What exactly are you proposing, Helen? I'm proposing we buy the building from the bank, she said. Pool our money, form a cooperative, make this a community-owned restaurant with Robert running it. Not to get rich, but to continue the mission his parents started. The room erupted in conversation. People started asking questions about how much it would cost, how it would work, whether it was even possible. Mrs. Patterson held up her hand for quiet. I've already talked to a lawyer friend of mine, she said. He'll help us with the legal work for free. I'm willing to put in $20,000 to start. Who else can contribute? Robert tried to protest. Mrs. Patterson, I can't let you all do this. It's too risky. What if I fail again? She looked at him with those sharp eyes. Robert, your parents failed twice and the community helped them back up. That's what community does. We lift each other up. Now stop arguing and let us help you. George stood up. I'm in for $5,000. Rita raised her hand. I can do $3,000. One by one, people started pledging money. Not huge amounts, but enough. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. Some could only offer $100, but they offered it with pride. Robert watched in disbelief as the number climbed higher and higher. We should also talk to the bank about the terms, someone said. Maybe they'd be willing to negotiate if they knew a community group was interested. Mrs. Patterson nodded. Good idea. I know the bank president. We go to the same church. I'll give him a call this afternoon. We'll need a business plan, someone else added. Show them we're serious. I can help with that, said a younger woman Robert didn't recognize. I'm an accountant. The conversation swirled around Robert. These people, most of whom he barely knew, were mobilizing to save his parents' restaurant. Not because they expected anything in return, but because they believed in what it represented. Mrs. Patterson caught his eye and winked. Your father used to say that kindness multiplies, she told him. He was right. Your parents put kindness into the world for decades. Now it's coming back. By the time everyone left 2 hours later, they had pledged almost $80,000 and had a plan to approach the bank. It wasn't enough to buy the building outright, but it might be enough to negotiate new terms, to give Robert a second chance. That evening, Tom came home to find Robert sitting at a table with papers spread everywhere. His eyes red from crying. "What happened?" Tom asked, alarmed. "Did the bank—" "The community is trying to save the restaurant," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Mrs. Patterson, she's this amazing old woman who my parents helped 30 years ago. She brought people together. They're forming a cooperative, pooling money, talking to lawyers. Tom, they're trying to save it." Tom sat down heavily, processing this information. "That's incredible, but why? Why would they do that for you?" Robert picked up his father's journal, the one he'd been reading all day. "Because my parents spent 30 years helping people, and those people never forgot. Mrs. Patterson said kindness multiplies. She was right. What does this mean?" Tom asked. "Is the restaurant saved?" "I don't know yet," Robert admitted. "The bank might still say no. Even if they say yes, making it work will be hard. But for the first time in months, I have hope. Real hope." Lily came downstairs then, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's going on? Why is everyone happy?" Robert smiled at her. "Remember when you found those journals yesterday? Well, they showed me something important, and then that important thing brought people together. Sometimes one small thing leads to another, and suddenly everything changes." Lily nodded seriously, even though she probably didn't fully understand. "Like dominoes." "Exactly like dominoes," Robert said. That night, after Tom and Lily had gone back upstairs, Robert sat alone in the restaurant one more time. Tomorrow might still be the last day. The bank might still say no. But something had shifted. He'd spent months feeling alone, feeling like a failure, feeling like he'd lost everything. Now he realized he'd never been alone at all. The community his parents had nurtured for decades was still there, still strong, still ready to help. All because his parents had chosen kindness over profit, people over money, community over individual success. Robert looked around the empty restaurant and made himself a promise. If they did save this place, if the bank agreed to the community's proposal, he would run it the way his father had intended. Not as a business focused on profit, but as a place that cared for people, a place where someone like Tom could get a job, where someone like Lily could do her homework, where anyone who was hungry would be fed and anyone who was lonely would find community. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. "Talk to the bank president. He's willing to meet with us tomorrow morning before the final closing. Bring your father's journals. I have a feeling they'll help our case. Don't lose hope, Robert." Robert read the message 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. Tomorrow morning. One more chance. One more opportunity to prove that what his parents built was worth saving. He closed his eyes and thought of his father, wished he could tell him about everything that had happened. But maybe somehow his father already knew. Maybe this was all part of the lesson he'd been trying to teach Robert all along. Kindness multiplies. Help others, and when you need it, help will come. Community isn't just something you benefit from. It's something you build one good deed at a time, and tomorrow, Robert would get the chance to prove that lesson was worth learning. The morning Tom left for his first day of work, Robert woke to find him already dressed and pacing nervously by the door. It was barely 5 in the morning, still dark outside. "Can't sleep?" Robert asked, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "I don't want to be late," Tom said. "First day, you know. I need to make a good impression. It's 5 o'clock. What time do you need to be there?" 7, but the bus takes an hour and I want to be early. Robert understood that kind of anxiety. When you've been down for so long, when someone finally gives you a chance, you're terrified of messing it up. "You'll do great," he said. "Just be yourself." Tom gave him a grateful look. "Lily's still asleep. I left a note for her, but could you just, make sure she knows where I am when she wakes up? She gets scared sometimes when I'm not there." "I've got her," Robert assured him. "Go make some money." After Tom left, Robert lay back down, but he couldn't fall back asleep. He kept thinking about the eviction notice, about the 2 days he had left. Tomorrow, the bank representative would come to do a final walkthrough. The day after that, he'd have to hand over the keys. This strange little arrangement they'd built over the past week was about to come crashing down. Around 7:30, he heard small footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared, clutching her backpack and the note from her father. Her hair was messy from sleep and she looked worried. "Papa had to go to work," she said, her voice small. "I know," Robert said gently. "He told me. He'll be back tonight. How about some breakfast? I think we've got some cereal left." They sat together at one of the tables, sharing a box of cornflakes that was getting stale, but was still edible. Lily ate slowly, swinging her legs under the chair. "Do you think Papa will like his new job?" she asked. "I think he will," Robert said. "Your dad's a hard worker. They're lucky to have him. I hope they're nice to him. Some people aren't nice to us because we don't have a home." Robert felt a surge of anger at the world, at the cruelty of people who looked down on others just because they'd had bad luck. "Well, that's their problem," he said firmly. "Having a home doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just makes you luckier." Lily thought about that, then nodded. "That's what Papa says too." After breakfast, Robert went to work boxing up more of the restaurant equipment. Lily sat at her usual table working on her math homework. Every so often she'd ask him a question, and he'd help her figure it out. It reminded him of helping his daughter with homework, back when he'd been part of her daily life. Around mid-morning, Lily got bored with her schoolwork and wandered over to where Robert was cleaning out the office. This room had been his father's domain, packed with filing cabinets and boxes of old paperwork. Robert had been avoiding it, but he couldn't put it off any longer. "This room is messy," Lily observed, which was putting it mildly. "My dad wasn't great at throwing things away," Robert said. "He kept everything." "Maybe there's treasure," Lily suggested hopefully. "More like 30-year-old tax returns," Robert said, but he smiled. "Want to help me look?" They started pulling out boxes and sorting through papers. Most of it was boring business stuff that should have been shredded years ago. Old invoices, receipts, inventory lists. But then Lily squeezed behind a filing cabinet to reach a box that had fallen back there. "I can't get it," she called. "It's stuck." Robert helped her move the cabinet, which scraped loudly across the floor. Behind it, wedged against the wall, was a metal lockbox covered in dust. Robert pulled it out, surprised by its weight. "What is it?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "I have no idea," Robert admitted. He'd never seen this box before. The lock was old and rusty. He tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. Finally, he found a screwdriver and managed to pop the lock. Inside were two things: a stack of notebooks with worn leather covers, and a bundle of letters held together with a rubber band that had gone brittle with age. "Is it treasure?" Lily asked hopefully. Robert picked up one of the notebooks and opened it. The handwriting was instantly familiar. His father's neat, careful script in both English and Chinese characters. It was a journal. "It's kind of treasure," Robert said softly. "These are my dad's private thoughts." He flipped through the pages. There were entries going back 30 years, all the way to when the restaurant first opened. His father had written about everything: daily sales, problems with suppliers, ideas for new menu items. But also personal things: worries about money, pride in his son's accomplishments, fears about the future. Robert sat down right there on the dusty office floor and started reading. Lily, sensing this was important, sat quietly beside him, looking at her own picture book. The first journal covered the restaurant's early years. His father wrote about the excitement of opening day, about how many people came to try the food. But then, a few months in, the entries got darker. Money was tight. They weren't getting as many customers as they'd hoped. His father wrote about lying awake at night, worried they might lose everything. Then, about 6 months in, there was an entry that made Robert's breath catch. "Mrs. Patterson came in today. She's been eating here 3 times a week since we opened. Always orders the same thing. Today she asked to speak with me privately. I thought she was going to complain about something. Instead, she told me she knows we're struggling. She can see it in our faces," she said. "She offered us a loan. $20,000, no interest, pay it back whenever we can." I was so shocked I almost said no. But I looked at Chen Wei. That was Robert's mother's name, and I could see she was crying. "We took the loan. I don't know what kind of angel this woman is, but she saved us." Robert stared at the page. He'd never known the restaurant had almost failed. His parents had never said anything about borrowing money or struggling those first years. To him, growing up, the restaurant had always seemed successful and stable. He kept reading. The journals covered years and years. There were happy entries about regular customers becoming like family, about Robert's birth, about small triumphs and victories. But there were also entries about struggles Robert had never known about. A robbery that his father hadn't reported to the police because he was afraid of trouble. A health scare with his mother that they'd hidden from Robert. And then, years later, another financial crisis. The recession hit us hard, his father had written in 2008. Lost half our customers in 6 months. The bank is threatening to call in our loan. I don't know what to do. I'm too proud to ask for help again, but I don't see another way. Then a few weeks later, I can't believe what happened today. Word got around about our troubles. I don't know how, maybe Mrs. Patterson told people. But this afternoon, 15 customers showed up with an idea. They want to organize a fundraiser. They said this restaurant is important to the community, that we've fed their families for years, that we've given jobs to their kids. They raised $12,000 in one weekend, enough to catch up on the loan and keep us going. I sat in the office and cried. Chen Wei found me there and held me. We are so blessed. Robert put the journal down, his hands shaking. His father had nearly lost the restaurant twice, and Robert had never known. All those years when he'd thought everything was fine, his parents had been fighting just to keep the doors open. And both times the community had saved them. Are you okay? Lily asked, noticing the tears on Robert's face. Yeah, Robert said, wiping his eyes. These journals are just showing me things I didn't know about my dad. He picked up the stack of letters next. They were from different people written over the years. Some were thank you notes from customers. Others were letters from people his parents had helped. There was one from a woman thanking his mother for giving her daughter a job when no one else would hire her because of a criminal record. Another from a man who wrote about how his father had fed his family for free for 3 months when he'd lost his job. One letter was from a teenage boy who wrote, Mr. Chen, I just wanted you to know that having a job at your restaurant saved my life. I was heading down a bad path, getting into trouble, but you took a chance on me, taught me about hard work and responsibility. I'm in college now studying business. Someday I want to run a restaurant just like yours, where people are treated like family. Robert read letter after letter, each one a story of how his parents had touched someone's life. Some were about free meals, others about jobs or advice or just a kind word when someone needed it. He'd known his parents were generous, but he hadn't realized the extent of it. They'd been quietly helping people for decades. There was one journal entry near the end that seemed to be written directly to Robert, even though his father had probably never intended him to read it. Robert works so hard. Sometimes I worry he works too hard. He wants to make me proud, I can see that, but I wish I could tell him something important. This restaurant isn't about the money or the success. It was never about that. It's about feeding people, yes, but it's about feeding their souls too. It's about creating a place where everyone is welcome, where everyone matters. The day we stop caring about people and start only caring about profit is the day we should close our doors. I hope Robert understands this. I hope he knows that the greatest success in life isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. Robert closed the journal and just sat there, feeling like the whole world had shifted on its axis. All these months he'd been so focused on failing to save the restaurant, on losing his father's legacy. But he'd been measuring success all wrong. The building didn't matter. The business didn't matter. What mattered was what his father had written about. Caring for people, creating community, giving when you could. And without even realizing it, Robert had been doing exactly that. He'd let Tom and Lily stay when they needed help. He'd shared food, offered shelter, given them a safe place. Maybe that was the real legacy. Maybe that was what his father would have wanted him to do, Robert? Lily's small voice broke through his thoughts. Why are you crying? I'm not sad, Robert said, and he realized it was true. For the first time in months, he wasn't sad. He was something else, grateful maybe, aware. I'm crying because these letters and journals are showing me something important. What? That sometimes losing everything helps you find what really matters. Lily didn't quite understand that, but she nodded anyway. Papa says that too. He says we lost our house and our car, but we still have each other. And that's the most important thing. Your papa's a smart man. That evening, when Tom came home from work, dirty and exhausted but with a smile on his face, Robert was waiting with the journals and letters spread out on one of the tables. How was the first day? Robert asked. Hard work, but good, Tom said. They said if I keep showing up and doing good work, they might have permanent position for me. Then he noticed all the papers. "What's all this?" "My father's journals," Robert explained. "Lily found them hidden behind a cabinet." "Tom, I've been reading them all day and I need to tell you something." Tom sat down looking concerned. "Okay." "I let you and Lily stay here thinking I was doing you a favor," Robert said. "But I was wrong. You did me a favor. These journals showed me that my father almost lost this place twice, and both times the community saved him because he'd spent years helping people. He gave away more food than he sold sometimes. He hired people nobody else would hire. He created a place where everyone was welcome. He sounds like he was a good man," Tom said. "He was, and I forgot that. I got so caught up in the numbers and the debt and trying to save the business that I forgot what the business was really about. But then you and Lily showed up and without meaning to, you reminded me." Tom looked confused. "How did we do that?" "By letting me help you. By letting me remember what it feels like to do something good for someone else. No strings attached. My father wrote in here that the restaurant was about feeding souls, not just stomachs. And you know what? This past week, feeding you and Lily, watching you work on fixing things, seeing Lily do her homework at those tables, that fed my soul. It reminded me why any of this matters." Tom's eyes were getting shiny. "Robert, that's beautiful, but tomorrow the bank takes over. What happens to us then? What happens to you?" Robert looked around the restaurant at all the memories contained in these walls. Then he looked at the journals and letters, at the evidence of his father's true legacy. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know one thing. Whatever happens next, I'm not going to forget this lesson. Life isn't about holding on to buildings or businesses. It's about people. It's about helping when you can and accepting help when you need it." Lily had fallen asleep at one of the tables, her head resting on her backpack. Tom picked her up gently and she stirred but didn't wake. "You're a good man, Robert," Tom said quietly. "Just like your father." After they went upstairs, Robert stayed in the restaurant, rereading parts of his father's journals by the dim light of the street lamps outside. Tomorrow the bank would come. The day after that, he'd lock the door for the last time. But tonight, surrounded by his father's words and the knowledge that he'd honored his father's true values by helping Tom and Lily, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt at peace. When Robert woke up the next morning, his back was killing him. Sleeping on the restaurant floor wasn't exactly comfortable, but he'd gotten used to it over the past few weeks. What he wasn't used to was the smell of coffee. He sat up quickly, confused. The coffee maker had been unplugged for days. Who was making coffee? Then he remembered. Tom and Lily. The apartment upstairs. Had he really done that last night, or had it been some kind of exhausted fever dream? Robert climbed to his feet, his joints cracking like bubble wrap, and followed the smell into the kitchen. Sure enough, the coffee maker was plugged in and brewing, and standing at the sink washing out the soup pot from last night was Tom. "Morning," Tom said, looking a little embarrassed. "Hope you don't mind. I found some coffee in the cabinet and thought, well, figured you might want some. It's the least I could do." Robert just stood there for a second, trying to process the scene. When was the last time someone had made him coffee? Linda used to, back when they were still trying to make things work. But that felt like a lifetime ago. "Thanks," Robert finally said, accepting the mug Tom handed him. "How'd you sleep?" "Like the dead," Tom admitted. "First real bed in 4 months. Lily didn't wake up once. Usually she wakes up 3 or 4 times a night, scared of strange noises or people walking by. But last night, out cold until 7 this morning." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking their coffee. Outside, the rain was still coming down hard. The storm the weatherman predicted had rolled in sometime around midnight and showed no signs of stopping. "So," Tom said carefully, "we should probably get going. You said just for the night, and you've already been more than generous." Robert looked out the window at the sheets of rain. Then he looked at Tom, really looked at him. The man's eyes were clearer this morning, less haunted. He'd probably showered upstairs because his hair was damp and combed. He looked more human, less like a ghost just drifting through the world. "Where would you go?" Robert asked. Tom shrugged. "Day shelter opens at 9. They have a warm room, some activities for kids. Lily can do her homework there. Then tonight we'll try for the overnight shelter again." "In this weather?" "We've been through worse," Tom said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Robert took another sip of his coffee. He was thinking about the eviction notice upstairs on the counter. 5 days left now. 5 days before the bank came and locked him out for good. What difference did it make if Tom and Lily stayed in the apartment for a few more days? The place was already lost. He couldn't make things any worse than they already were. "Look," Robert said slowly, "I'm going to be here all week anyway, packing up the restaurant equipment, cleaning things out. The apartment upstairs is just sitting empty. You might as well stay until I'm done here. No sense wandering around in this storm." Tom's eyes widened. "Robert, we can't keep taking advantage of your kindness. We're strangers. You don't owe us anything." "You're not taking advantage if I'm offering," Robert said, surprising himself with how firm his voice sounded. "Besides, you made me coffee. That's worth at least a few more nights." That got a small smile out of Tom. "You sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything anymore," Robert admitted. "But yeah, stay. At least until the weather clears up." The weather didn't clear up. If anything, it got worse. The storm that was supposed to pass in a day stuck around for 3. Heavy rain, wind strong enough to rattle the windows, and temperatures that dropped low enough that Robert was glad he didn't have to worry about Tom and Lily being outside in it. They fell into a strange routine during those days. Robert would wake up early and start working on packing up the restaurant. Tom would come downstairs around 7, always with coffee ready, and he'd start helping. At first, Robert protested. He didn't want Tom to feel like he had to work for his room. But Tom insisted. "I need to be useful," Tom explained. "I've spent 4 months feeling worthless. Let me help." So they worked together. They took down the pictures from the walls, carefully wrapping each frame in newspaper. They emptied the storage closet, sorting through 30 years of accumulated stuff. Everything from old menus to broken appliances that Robert's father had kept because you never know when you might need parts. Lily would sit at one of the tables doing her schoolwork. She was in 2nd grade, she told Robert shyly, and her favorite subject was reading. The school had been understanding about her situation, Tom explained. They knew she was homeless and they let her keep coming even though they'd moved out of the district. A teacher even sent home extra supplies sometimes, and let Lily keep her books at school so they wouldn't get lost or damaged. On the 2nd day, while Robert was wrestling with a shelf that wouldn't budge, Tom disappeared into the back. Robert heard some banging and cursing, and then Tom emerged looking triumphant. "That walk-in cooler door," Tom said. "The one that sticks?" "It's fixed." Robert stared at him. "What?" "That thing's been broken for 6 months. I had 2 repair guys look at it and they both said I needed to replace the whole mechanism." Tom shrugged. "The track was bent. I just hammered it back into shape and oiled the rollers. Should work fine now." Robert tested it. The door slid open and closed smooth as butter. He'd been working around that sticky door for so long he'd forgotten what it was like when it functioned properly. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Robert asked. "Construction teaches you a lot about fixing things," Tom said. "You'd be amazed what you can repair with basic tools and a little patience." Over the next few days, Tom fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom that had been dripping for a year. He repaired a loose tile in the kitchen floor. He even managed to get the ancient dishwasher working again, something Robert had given up on months ago. "You're really good at this," Robert said, watching Tom work on a cabinet door that had been hanging crooked forever. "I like working with my hands," Tom said. "That's what I miss most about construction. There's something satisfying about fixing things, you know, making something broken work again."